Goldspot sent me these Lamy Safari fountain pens, and I'm going to use them for drawing. I like to use ink with watercolor, and I normally use disposable technical pens, and that can get expensive. Here's the technical pens I normally use for like my ink drawings. I think it'll be more efficient to use fountain pens. The other cool thing is that you can fill it up with your own ink, and I have some platinum carbon ink, and it's supposed to be waterproof, so that should allow me to apply washes of watercolor over the top of my drawings. So we'll see how that works. I'll also set one up with the cartridges. Lamy comes with like a blue ink, and I'll use that for like note-taking and journaling and stuff like that. And that's super easy to set up. And then you would need these converters if you want to use your own ink. Before I set them up, let's take a closer look at them. Goldspot let me pick out whatever color I wanted, and how could I resist this aquamarine color? Now, I'm thinking maybe I should do some color matching videos where I match the color of these pens. Let me know in the comments what you think. This is like a special edition. This is the Aquamarine Candy Safari. And the difference is it has like a matte texture to it. These other two have like a smooth, glossy appearance to it. The clip is the same color as the body on the special edition pens, whereas the clips on the regular pens are plain metal. The clip is very sturdy, it should fit into any pocket. I even slid it over a thick notebook, and it hasn't stretched out or gotten any looser with use. They have a stainless steel nib, and if you look close enough, you can see that there's an M on there, and that stands for medium. And I think this aquamarine is extra fine, so it should have like an EF on there. I'm going to set this yellow one up for writing and note-taking. I'll put a cartridge in it, and I'll do that first. So let's get started with that. There's a cardboard ring on there, and it says remove. And that's just on there so that the cartridge doesn't automatically start up during shipment or any other time. So if you look, there's like a shoulder on here, and inside the pen, see those little plastic things? That will actually press up against the cartridge as you screw this on, and it'll puncture the end and start the ink going. So you want to get rid of this cardboard ring. You can just recycle it or dispose of it. And to start it, you just twist it on, there's some resistance, and then from there you just put the cap on it. So it'll take a little bit for the ink to work its way down through the nib, so you just leave it in a vertical position like this for a few minutes, and then you can start using it. So my pen is loaded up with ink, and we can give it a try on this Stillman and Byrne sketchbook. So let's see here. So if you notice, this side is round, and then this is for your index finger and your thumb. It's pretty ergonomic. I kind of like it, and it seems to write really smooth. So I'll just, scribble here a little bit, and we'll see if it's waterproof. I don't think it will be. That's why I bought the other ink. So there's that pen, and then I'll set up the other one with the drying ink. You can add your own ink to these pens, but you'll need these special converters. I bought a package of 5 of them because I got 3 pens, and then I'll use one for cleaning too, I think. But you want to make sure that you have ones that work with your pens. And on here it says Lamy fountain pen ink converter. So you don't need the cartridge. I'll just save this for my writing pen. And I'll just save that for later, and I can dispose of this cardboard ring like we did last time. In the factory, they test out every single Lamy pen, and they load it up with blue ink. So you want to flush this out first before you fill it up. If you're filling it up with the same type of ink, then you don't need to clean it out. So you need some water, and I got a jar of water over here, and a converter. Here's one of the converters, and if you look at it close up, there's a little piston in there, and if you turn it counterclockwise, it pushes down. So what you can do is when you connect it, you dip the nib into the water and you twist it, and it'll suck up the water, and it should clear out some of that dry ink. So let's give that a shot. So I'll take the cap off and then insert that into the pen. I have the nib into the water, and I'll just twist this so it sucks up the water. I'm turning it clockwise. So you move the piston up and down a few times to clean out the ink feed and nib. So I'm seeing some blue come out into the waters. There's definitely ink in there. And I could see, if I do this one more time, there's some blue ink in the water, so there was definitely some ink in the feed. So I'll flush it out a couple more times to make sure it's cleared out. That already looks more clear. Let's do it one more time here. So there's water in here, and I want to just twist this to push that water out. You can see it dripping out of the nib. And then I'll take this off and use a paper towel to dry the nib. I think I'll let this dry out before I fill up the converter with ink, just so that I'm not diluting my ink with water. And when I wipe this off, I could tell there was a little bit of blue still left on the nib, but I think it should be okay. So now let's fill it up with some of this carbon ink. So it shows there's a reservoir in there. You put the cap on tight, just tighten the cap, turn it upside down, and then you can fill your pen up with ink. And I think the reservoir is there so that if there's a little bit of ink left in the bottle, you'll still be able to access it. It'll be higher up in the bottle. So here's all the instructions. The first step is to connect the converter. That's pretty simply just pop it in there. You want to turn this counterclockwise so the piston, which is this black thing here, is at the bottom. So that way when you stick it in the ink and you turn it clockwise, the piston will go up and it'll draw the ink up into the converter. It might take more than one try to get that to happen. Sometimes it doesn't fill all the way up. So we'll take this out. It's a nice bottle. So the cap's on tight. I'll turn it upside down, which probably don't have to do because it's a full bottle. I'll take the cap off, and I can see the level in there. It might be hard to see that on camera because it's so dark. But I'll put it down in there so most of the nib's in it. And then I'll twist this clockwise. So that drew up some ink, but there's still a lot of air in there. So what I'll do is stick it back in the ink, turn it counterclockwise to push the plunger all the way down. Okay, so it's all the way down. And now I'll pull it back up again. And now there's much more ink in there. It's completely full. There's a bunch of ink on the end. You could just take a paper towel and wipe it off gently. First you get it on your hands. Some soap and water, that'll probably come right off. I'll put the cap back on before I dump it all over my desk. Now you just screw the barrel on and test it out. This time you don't have to wait for the ink to make its way down to the nib because you had it dunked into the bottle of ink. So it should start writing from the beginning. That's a nice black line. I like how that looks. So I'm gonna let this dry for a little bit and then I'll test it with water to see if it's waterproof. I didn't want to wait for it to dry, so I used a hair dryer, and that usually helps too with any other type of ink drying. So I'm just using plain water here, and it seems to be fairly waterproof. I really don't see any smearing, so that's a really good sign. And I'll try this blue ink, which had much more time to dry. Yeah, see, that starts to dissolve right away. Now that's not a total failure. You might be able to use that in your drawings to make it look like watercolor. Might be kind of fun. I thought I would do a demo in my sketchbook using the fountain pen with watercolor. And I have these boat scenes from my recent trip to Olcott. It's my painting adventure video. So I sketched it out first with pencil, and then I'm filling it in with the fountain pen. Kind of made a mistake here in that I'm drawing from the bottom up. It would probably make more sense to start at the top, or at least from left to right, so you're not smearing the ink with your hand. I didn't smear anything, but it would just be easier that way. I'm drawing in some of the shapes of the algae. Sometimes I draw a box around my drawings in my sketchbook. I'm just adding in the final details. I used a hair dryer to dry the ink so that it doesn't smear when I paint over it with watercolor. You could just wait a little while. The one thing with fountain pens is it seems to lay down a little bit more ink, so you have to let it dry before you go over it with any type of watercolor. These watercolors are from Golden. They're core watercolors. I have a link to all the art supplies in the description below. The palette is from a Winsor Newton Cotman set of watercolors, and when I use them up, I just fill them up with the core watercolors from the tube. This is cerulean blue. It's the color of the sky reflected in the water. This algae was a very bright green color, and in the photograph it has a hard edge where it meets the water. And I thought that might be a little distracting, so I softened that as I painted it. Now I'm just going in with some of the darker colors to create shadows. That's usually what makes a painting pop, is you have the contrast between the darks and the lights. I don't fill in every single detail of every boat. It would get too distracting. I just sort of put in the basic shapes. I'm mixing up phthalo blue and quinacridone magenta and a little bit of yellow to make the dark colors of the water. At this stage, I'm just trying to pull it together, trying to figure out like what the darkest area should be, and I'm trying to blend all the different colors in the water together so it's more seamless. I used a brush pen to put a bold line around the outside of the painting, and then the final step was to take some white watercolor and put in some of the highlights for the mask. This was a fun little sketch, and I think I'll be using these fountain pens for more watercolor drawings. You might want to watch my painting adventure video, or the other video is the one suggested by YouTube.